Officer found a German shepherd, weeping at his handler's grave after years missing. The truth behind shocked him. The cemetery was silent, a place where even the wind seemed too respectful to stir the fallen leaves. But as Officer Daniels passed row after row of gravestones, a sound stopped him cold. It wasn't the whisper of branches or the creak of iron gates. It was a low, broken whimper that carried raw grief. He followed it, boots crunching softly against gravel, until he froze at the sight before him. There, pressed against a weathered headstone, was a German shepherd. Its fur was matted and dull, ribs pressing against skin, but its eyes were fixed on the stone as though nothing else in the world existed. A faint whine escaped its throat, rising into a mournful cry that tore through the silence. The name carved into the grave chilled Daniels. It belonged to an officer reported killed in the line of duty years ago. A handler whose dog had vanished the same night. For a long moment, Daniels couldn't breathe. How had the dog survived all this time? Where had it been? And most of all, why had it returned now, only to collapse in sorrow at this grave? Officer. Daniels had seen grief before. Families broken at doorsteps, folded flags handed to trembling hands. But nothing prepared him for this. The dog at the grave was not just mourning. It was rooted to the earth as though chained by invisible bonds of memory. Its muzzle rested against the cold stone, paws stretched flat in surrender, yet its body trembled with every breath. Daniels crouched slowly, not wanting to startle it. He had worked K9 units himself, and the sight hit him harder than he could admit. The badge engraved on the grave glinted faintly in the dim light. Officer Mark Harris. Daniels remembered the Dame, one of the bravest handlers he had heard about, killed years earlier during a raid. His German shepherd had vanished that night, presumed dead or stolen. But here it was, alive, older, and still loyal to the man who had never returned. The air carried the scent of rain-soaked earth and cut grass, but beneath it lingered something sharper, the smell of exhaustion and wounds. Daniels edged closer, and the dog lifted its head, golden eyes meeting his. For a heartbeat, Daniels felt he was staring into grief itself. The eyes were hollow, yet fiercely guarded, as though warning him not to come closer. Daniels whispered softly, "Easy, boy. You're safe now." The shepherd let out a low growl, not in aggression but in pain. Its fur was patchy, its ribs sharp under dull skin, scars crisscrossing its frame. It had lived through storms, hunger, perhaps even battles, but nothing had broken its will to return here. Daniels wondered how far it had traveled, how many nights it had endured just to weep at this grave. The cemetery wind shifted, rattling the branches of an old oak nearby. Daniels felt a chill run down his spine. Stories of Harris's death had circulated for years. An ambush, gunfire, confusion in the dark. Some whispered it hadn't been an accident. And now, seeing the shepherd here, alive and grieving, questions began clawing at his mind. Why had the dog stayed hidden all this time? Where had it gone? And most of all, what had driven it back now, after years of silence? Daniels reached out cautiously, his fingers brushing the ground near the shepherd. The dog didn't move, but its body trembled, as though holding back a flood of memories too heavy to release. Daniels swallowed hard. He knew K9 bonds when a handler died. Part of the dog died too. Yet this one hadn't given up. It had carried the grief, alone, until it found its way home. Daniels looked around. The cemetery was empty, the world holding its breath. He pulled out his phone, considering calling animal control or the precinct. But something inside him stopped. This wasn't just any stray. This was a dog with a story written into its scars, one he couldn't hand over to strangers. He pocketed the phone and sat down against the grave next to it, letting the silence stretch. Minutes passed, broken only by the dog's shallow breaths and the rustle of leaves overhead. Slowly, its growls quieted, replaced by low whines that cut straight into Daniel's chest. He thought of his own retired K9 partner, Rex, now resting at home. He knew what loyalty looked like, but this This was loyalty beyond death. Suddenly, a faint sound drifted across the graves. Footsteps. Daniel's head snapped up, scanning the darkened path. The shepherd stiffened, its ears pricking despite exhaustion, a growl rumbling faintly in its throat. Daniels rose halfway, hand near his belt, but the sound faded, leaving only silence. He frowned, unease prickling at his skin. Someone else had been here, or was still watching. He turned back to the shepherd and for the first time noticed something he had missed. Around its neck, hidden beneath clumps of matted fur, was a torn leather collar. Daniels knelt quickly, brushing the fur aside. The leather was cracked, nearly disintegrated, but faint letters still remained. His breath caught. It was Harris's call sign, burned into the collar. This wasn't just the dog, it was the partner, returned from the shadows. Daniels sat back hard, his chest heavy with questions. Where had this dog been for years? Who had kept it alive? And what truth had it carried back to this grave, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it? Daniels stayed crouched beside the grave, his hand inches from the shepherd's paw. But the dog didn't relax. It trembled as if fighting an unseen battle, torn between collapse and defiance. Its golden eyes flicked toward the trees, then back, to the gravestone, as though guarding it from intruders no one else could see. Daniels felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just grief, it was vigilance. Somewhere deep inside, the animal still believed it was on duty, protecting its partner's memory with the last of its strength. Daniels whispered, "You don't have to fight alone anymore." The shepherd's ears twitched, but a guttural growl built in its throat, directed not at him, but at the darkness beyond. The wind pushed through the cemetery again, colder this time. Daniel scanned the rows of stones, the shadows stretching long in the fading light. His training screamed at him. They weren't alone. He stood slowly, hand near the holster on his hip, eyes narrowing. The shepherd struggled to rise, its muscles quivering, but the chains of exhaustion pulled it back down. Daniel's heart ached. The dog wanted to protect, even broken, even dying. And yet the question tore at him. What danger lingered that had kept this animal hidden for years? The footsteps returned, faint but deliberate, crunching against gravel somewhere along the path. Daniels turned sharply, his breath steadying, but all he saw was shifting shadows. He called out, "Who's there?" Silence answered, heavy and unbroken. The shepherd whined low, its ears pressed back, its body curling protectively against the gravestone. Daniels crouched again, whispering, "I hear it too." He pressed a hand lightly to the earth, feeling vibrations that told him the truth. Someone had been there, moving and then stopped, watching. The shepherd's breathing quickened as though reliving some horror burned into its memory. Daniels recognized the signs. Trauma, deep and unhealed. His chest tightened. How many nights had this dog wandered, hunted by shadows, waiting for a voice it would never hear again? He brushed his thumb over the torn leather collar, the engraved call sign like a ghost pressing against his palm. Somewhere in that silence, Daniels knew the answers were buried. A distant crack echoed, branches snapping. Daniels froze. The shepherd lunged weakly forward, bark breaking from its throat, raw and broken but fierce enough to split the night. Daniels's hand tightened on his weapon. Adrenaline surged through him, but no figure appeared. Only the trees, shifting in the restless wind. Still, unease gnawed at him. He could handle danger, but what he couldn't handle was the growing certainty that this dog had been running from something all these years. Something tied to Harris's death. He knelt again, lowering his voice. "Show me," he whispered, not sure if he was asking the dog or the memory it carried. The shepherd met his gaze, eyes clouded yet burning with an intensity that made Daniel's skin prickle. It shifted its weight toward him, trembling, a silent plea fighting past its pain. Daniels realized with a jolt, the dog wasn't just grieving, it was trying to lead him somewhere. But the sound returned. Footsteps closer this time, deliberate. Daniels spun, his heart hammering, every sense on edge. His instincts screamed ambush, the same kind Harris had fallen 2 years ago. The shepherd barked again, its voice hoarse, collapsing after the effort but still trying to stand. Daniels raised his voice into the night. "Come out." Nothing. Only silence, thicker than before. The truth clawed at him, a realization he didn't want to face. Harris's death had never been just a raid gone wrong, and the shepherd, this loyal, broken survivor, had carried the truth through years of exile, waiting for the moment someone would finally listen. Daniels clenched his jaw, heart pounding as he glanced back at the dog. Its body trembled, eyes locked on him, as if demanding he uncover the secret it had been guarding for so long. For the first time that night, Daniels wasn't sure who was in greater danger, the dog clinging to life or himself, now pulled into the shadows of a story that wasn't finished. Daniel's pulse thudded in his ears as the shepherd shifted again, weakly nudging its muzzle toward the base of the gravestone. At first he thought it was just resting, but then he noticed the dirt was freshly disturbed. His chest tightened. Slowly, he brushed soil aside with his hand, revealing something half buried beneath the roots. It was a scrap of fabric, military grade, cloth torn and stained, weathered by years. His breath caught. Harris's unit had worn these during the raid. He lifted it carefully, the fibers brittle, and realized the dog had carried this, preserved it, and brought it back here. The shepherd whimpered, pawing faintly at the earth as though urging him to see more. Daniel's throat tightened. This wasn't coincidence. Somewhere during its years of absence, the dog had guarded evidence, something linked to that night. He remembered the rumors, the ambush, the questions no one answered. Harris had died, but some believed there had been betrayal, someone feeding information to the enemy. Daniels's hand shook as he turned the fabric, and his eyes widened. Stitched faintly along the edge was a number, a call sign not belonging to Harris, but another officer, someone still alive. The realization sent a chill through him. This dog hadn't simply vanished into the wild, it had survived, carrying fragments of truth, waiting until it could return home. Daniels looked into its eyes, and for a moment he saw the memories burning there. Gunfire, shouting, Harris falling, the shepherd fighting against hands that dragged it away. The scars across its muzzle were no accident. It had been restrained, perhaps beaten, silenced. Yet somehow it had escaped, clutching what little evidence it could, and returned years later to the only place it trusted, its handler's grave. Daniel's breath shook. This wasn't just loyalty, this was testimony. The dog pressed its head into his knee, trembling, and Daniels felt the weight of its plea. It wasn't just mourning, it was begging him to finish what Harris had started, to uncover what had been hidden. Daniels gripped the fabric tightly, his eyes narrowing. Somewhere out there, someone connected to this number had been part of that night. Someone who might not want the truth dragged back into the light. And judging by the footsteps he had heard, someone might already know the shepherd had returned. Daniels clenched his jaw, heart hammering. The dog's loyalty had carried it through years of exile, scars and silence. Now it had handed him the thread of a truth too dangerous to ignore. But as the cemetery fell quiet again, a darker thought shadowed him. If the shepherd had survived all this time just to return the evidence, then whoever betrayed Harris might already be hunting them both. Daniels gripped the torn fabric tighter, his knuckles white, while the shepherd pressed against him, trembling violently. Its breaths were shallow, labored, each one sounding like a battle it might not win. He wanted to scoop it up, rush it out of this graveyard of memories, but the prickling at his neck told him they weren't alone. The footsteps had faded, but the silence now felt heavier than any gunshot. Somewhere, someone was waiting, watching. The shepherd gave a sudden, guttural bark and tried to lunge forward, collapsing almost instantly against the soil. Its body convulsed, a raw cry tearing from its throat. Daniels dropped to his knees, panic clawing at him. "Stay with me," he whispered, one hand pressed to its side, feeling the weak flutter of a heart that was slipping. The dog's eyes rolled toward him, glassy but still burning with that stubborn, pleading fire. Daniels's chest tightened. It wasn't just begging for life. It was begging him to finish what Harris never could. A twig snapped, this time closer. Daniels spun, gun drawn, scanning the shadows. Between two gravestones, he caught the brief outline of a man's frame before it melted back into the trees. His breath quickened. Whoever it was didn't want to be seen, but they wanted Daniels to know they were there. A warning. His instincts screamed ambush, the kind Harris had walked into years ago. He shifted, placing himself between the shepherd and the darkness, weapon raised. The storm in his chest grew louder, the weight of loyalty and the gnawing truth colliding into one choice: protect the dog, or uncover the danger now circling them. The shepherd whimpered again, forcing its trembling paw onto Daniel's knee, as if tethering him. The gesture nearly broke him. Torn between duty and compassion, he made his decision. Daniels scooped the heavy, limp body into his arms, the dog's head lolling against his shoulder. Its heartbeat was faint, almost swallowed, by the silence. A rustle surged through the trees, followed by the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel, pursuing. Daniels bolted down the path, every muscle on fire, the shepherd's weight dragging him but his will forcing him forward. His breath thundered, the gravestones blurring as he sprinted toward the gates. Behind him, the footsteps followed, quickening, but never close enough to reveal the face in the dark. The shepherd stirred once, eyes fluttering open, and gave a faint cry that broke Daniel's resolve. "Hold on, just a little longer," he gasped. The gates loomed ahead, the faint glow of streetlights beyond. Salvation, or perhaps just another trap. Daniels shoved forward, refusing to stop, even as doubt clawed at his chest. As he burst from the graveyard, the night swallowed the sounds behind him. Silence returned, but it was no relief. He staggered toward his car, lowering the shepherd onto the seat, its breath shallow, each one weaker than the last. He brushed a hand over its scarred head, voice cracking. "Don't you dare leave me now, not after everything you carried." The monitor of his phone glowed as he called for help, but even as the line rang, the shepherd's chest faltered, its body stilling for one terrifying heartbeat. Daniels froze, fear consuming him, and in that suspended moment, he realized, both, their lives now hung on a truth powerful enough to kill for. The small veterinary clinic smelled of antiseptic and steel, a stark contrast to the damp earth of the cemetery. Daniels pushed through the doors, cradling the limp shepherd in his arms, his uniform stained with mud and streaks of dried blood. The receptionist gasped, but the vet was already rushing forward, snapping on gloves. "Get him on the table!" The shepherd lay motionless under the harsh fluorescent lights, its chest rising shallowly. A monitor crackled to life, each beep uneven, stuttering as if unsure whether life still lingered inside. Daniel stood close, one hand gripping the dog's. "Pew," the other pressed hard against the trembling body. His throat burned as he whispered, "Hold on. You've carried the truth this long. You don't get to stop now." The dog's ear flicked faintly at his voice, but its eyes stayed shut, lashes clumped with dust and tears. The vet worked quickly, attaching IV lines, flushing tar-like residue from old wounds, pressing a stethoscope to its chest. His brow furrowed. "Weak heartbeat. We may lose him." The words punched through Daniels like bullets. He bent lower, his forehead nearly touching the shepherd's. "Don't you dare. Harris trusted you. I trust you. You're not done yet." The machine skipped. A terrifying silence between beeps. Daniel's heart stopped with it. He squeezed the paw tighter, his voice breaking. "Come on, soldier, one more fight." For a moment there was nothing, just silence, the storm outside rattling the windows. Then, faint but steady, the beep returned. Daniels exhaled shakily, tears streaking his face. Minutes stretched into hours. The dog stirred weakly once, a broken whimper escaping its throat. Daniels brushed a hand down its scarred muzzle. "That's it. You're still here." The vet gave a guarded nod. "He's holding on, but tonight we'll decide." Daniels stayed at the shepherd's side, unmoving, his whispered prayers filling the sterile room. Each fragile heartbeat on the monitor was both a promise and a threat. The dog had survived storms, betrayal, and years of exile, but the battle against time itself was the hardest of all. And as dawn's light began to creep through the blinds, the question remained, had loyalty and love been enough to pull him back, or was this his final watch beside the grave of the only man he had ever truly known? The morning sun crept gently into the clinic, bathing the room in soft light. Daniels sat slumped in a chair, his uniform wrinkled and streaked, but his eyes never left the German Shepherd resting on the table. Tubes and monitors still surrounded the animal, its breaths shallow but steady. Against all odds, it had survived. The relief in Daniels's chest was sharp, nearly painful, but he knew the truth. The scars etched into this dog's body and soul would never fade. No amount of sunlight could erase the years it had wandered alone, carrying grief like a chain. The vet entered quietly, offering a tired but honest nod. He's weak, but he'll live. He won't ever be the same, though. Daniel's throat tightened as he reached forward, stroking the shepherd's head. The dog's eyes flickered open briefly, clouded but filled with something that pierced him. Trust. For the first time since Harris's death, the animal was not guarding alone. Daniels whispered, "You did your duty. Now let me do mine." Outside the clinic, whispers spread among officers who had heard fragments of the story. About Harris, about the ambush, about the dog that had carried a clue home. Rumors of betrayal resurfaced. Questions that had long been buried now demanded answers. Daniels knew the road ahead would be dangerous. Whoever had betrayed Harris had left scars not just on the fallen officer, but on this loyal companion who had carried grief like a soldier's banner. Yet, as Daniels glanced back at the shepherd, now resting but alive, he felt a fragile hope stirring. Harris was gone, yes, but his legacy breathed on, not in medals or reports, but in the unwavering loyalty of a dog who had refused to abandon him. Daniels exhaled slowly, his chest heavy with both sorrow and gratitude. The truth was not yet fully uncovered, but one thing was certain. Loyalty like this did not die, even when buried beneath years of silence. And as Daniels left the room, he knew this was not an ending, but the beginning of uncovering a story too powerful and too painful to remain hidden. The scene would linger on the German Shepherd's scarred but trusting eyes, half closed as it rested beneath the warm morning light. Beside him, Officer Daniels stood silently, the torn scrap of fabric still in his hand, evidence of betrayal, but also proof of loyalty that had endured against all odds. This was no ordinary rescue. This was the story of devotion that survived. Years of hunger, pain, and silence, only to end at the grave of the man it loved most. It forces us to ask, what kind of heart carries loyalty beyond death itself? And now I want to ask you directly, if you had discovered this shepherd, starved, scarred, yet weeping over its fallen partner, would you have the strength to fight for its truth, no matter the danger? If your answer is yes, if you believe loyalty like this deserves to be remembered, then share this story. Let others feel the weight of this sacrifice, and subscribe so that together we can honor the silent heroes who teach us what true devotion really means.